In a world where remasters and remakes are becoming more and more commonplace, it's opened up a treasure trove of nostalgia for fans young and old. Now, alongside the usual FIFA and Call of Duty installments, developers are seeing the value in reviving old franchises. Now, don't get me wrong, not every title deserves the resurrection treatment. After all, who really wants to see another Bubsy game? They're totally making another Bubsy game. However, the 10 franchises we've chosen are not only deserving of a fresh entry, but will probably make you wonder why it hasn't happened already. With this in mind, I'm Jules for WhatCulture.com, and these are 10 forgotten video games that should totally be revived. Number 10. Power Stone. When you've got a game that regularly topped polls of best Dreamcast game, then you know you've got something special on your hands. Alongside Smash Bros, Power Stone was the party fighter of the day. Mixing in colourful characters, that classic Capcom style, and a bunch of hilarious weapons, it was an unrivaled joy to play and a great way to make enemies of your friends. Because of the 3D fighting environments, Power Stone allowed fighters to interact with environmental objects in order to get the edge on their opponents. So if somebody's just spamming kicks, then just lob a table at them. It's the Power Stone way. And for that reason alone, should get another sequel. Number 9. Fight Night. It's weird to think that 6 years have passed since the last installment of the Fight Night franchise, a series that dominated the boxing genre for so many years. Yet EA clearly got tired of the sport of gentleman thugs and decided to drop the anchor and sail off with UFC instead. Now, don't get me wrong, the UFC games are great, but in its day, Fight Night was f***ing rocky. In that it was a whole mess of punches, and if I was playing, not a lot of blocking happened. Fight Night Champion, the last game to come out, even featured an emotional single-player story alongside some of the tightest controls in the series. It deserves a comeback, as it's a franchise we feel can go the distance. Puns, I've got them. Number 8. ROLLCAGE. There are a lot of racing games out there, spanning from kart racers to sci-fi super speedsters. But one game which had a wicked concept but an unfortunate lack of gas was ROLLCAGE. Made by the same devs responsible for Destruction Derby and Wipeout, ROLLCAGE offered visceral racing without the limitations of gravity. The ability to drive on walls and ceilings with ease made for races that rewarded creative thinking, and when coupled with a bumping soundtrack by Fatboy Slim and weapons to level your opponents, made for a ridiculously fast-paced experience. There was a spiritual successor of sorts in the form of the game Grip, but an official entry would be so welcomed in this current climate of competitive racing. Number 7. Skate. The skateboarding genre is aching at the moment. With the utter balls that was the last Tony Hawk game, and it being 7 years since Skate 3, we need something to come back and give the counterculture some love. And while I adore the Tony Hawk's franchise for the most part, it's Skate which needs to return. With its fantastic graphics, butter-smooth gameplay, and utterly na-na soundtrack, Skate has been the best interpretation of the medium. What other game can be this utterly engrossing? Just rolling through the vibrant cities, carving down long hills, and hitting huge airs. It's such a positive experience through and through. Plus, if all the existential chill boarding gets too dry, then you can have a laugh with the amazing ragdoll physics, build your own ramps, and play with the city to your heart's content. It's utter bliss, and it needs to come back. Number 6. Siphon Filter. Siphon Filter was the crystallization of the third-person shooter form, combining tight controls with really fun running and/or gunning. The series hit its peak with its first 3 games and then saw diminishing returns on each further sequel, but the concept of a stealthy and action-focused game has been shown to work with the latest Splinter Cell titles, so could easily make a return. The game's focus on espionage, counter-terrorist operations, and a whole load of tasering people until they set on fire was utterly great. Plus, the studio that made the original games is now part of Sony, and is even producing the rather tantalizing Days Gone. Therefore, if that game sells well, what's to stop Siphon Filter making a return? Number 5. Burnout. 2008. What a great year. The Hadron Collider, Obama becoming president, that day that I set the record for single most casualties with a food processor. Oh, and it was the year that one of the best arcade races of all time got released. Burnout Paradise sure was that. A paradise of beautiful environments, insane speed, and more variation than your mum's sex moves. Puns, I've got them. Now, many attribute the decline of Burnout due to EA snapping up the studio and favouring its own need for speed antics. And while those games have been for the most part great, they still lack the arse-out exhilaration you get from the Burnout titles. And to be honest, we could all use that Crash Mode multiplayer in our lives once more. Number 4. BANJO-KAZOOIE. 2008. What a shit year. Earthquakes in Sichuan, riots in Greece, the day I broke the record for single most shit taken after mixing up my Nesquik with chocolate-flavoured laxative powder. Oh, and it was also the year that one of the worst reimaginings of a childhood classic took place since Barney the emo dinosaur sang "I cut you, you bleed me." I'm speaking, of course, about Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts, a shoddy vehicle game in an empty world devoid of fun. I'm not bitter, I promise. The series needs a proper comeback, as the original 2 games were a huge amount of fun, mixing puzzles with over-the-top characters and a whole load of collectibles. There have been several rare Splinter companies since who've tried and failed to recapture the vibe, with Yooka-Laylee falling just short of the mark. Here's hoping that Microsoft get their heads out of their ass long enough to know that reviving this franchise is a license to print money. Number 3. Perfect Dark. Originally conceived as a follow-up to GoldenEye themed around the subsequent Tomorrow Never Dies Bond film, Perfect Dark evolved into an original one with an immersive single-player experience orientated around protagonist Joanna Dark. As with GoldenEye, the game's true selling point was its multiplayer modes. Traditional co-op and death matches were supplemented by the likes of Capture the Flag, King of the Hill, and a mode that enabled one player to take control of Joanna while others took control of the enemies she faced. Yet, as with Banjo, Microsoft was slow to capitalize on their newly acquired property, only releasing a follow-up which was a prequel in 2005. A sequel to the original has never materialized, with an enhanced 2010 remake being all that fans have been given to savor since. Number 2. Final Fantasy Tactics. Now, I know you've heard of Final Fantasy, what with 15 having rocked the socks off so many people very recently, but many often ignore the outstanding side series that were the Tactics games. Basically, they've got some of the best battle mechanics and stories in the franchise that rival even the main entries in terms of narrative and presentation. It's just a shame, therefore, that it's never really received the same love as the others, as in many ways, they're better games. They've got a damn sight less annoying characters for a fucking start. Fingers crossed if this ever did come back, it would be in the shape of the early titles and not the watered-down mobile game that we got lumbered with in 2013. And number 1, SSX, but mostly tricky. It's tricky to rock a rhyme, that's right, on time, it's tricky! It's tricky. Oh! With this fantastic, bombastic tune, SSX Tricky sped off the slopes and into my heart. This arcade snow scorer was an avalanche of joy, complete with hilarious characters, some pH-fat slopes, and more beats than an abusive father disciplining his kids. Puns! I've got them? Is that funny? Now, the last entry we got was pretty good, but it's really tricky and SSX3 where the franchise shone its brightest. Still, it's been over 6 years since our last dose of slope powder, and it's leaving me with an itch in my gums and hands. All they've got to do is strip away all the real-world stuff like the wingsuit and the oxygen meter and just give us more of the over-the-top downhill runs and characters who look like they've fallen out of a Monty Python sketchbook. And that's our list. Got any other games which deserve to be revived? Well, let me know about them in the comments section below. And why not swing by whatculture.com for more news and articles like this every goddamn day. As always, I've been Jules, you've been awesome, and I'll speak to you soon.